Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone. If you are just joining us, we are looking forward to the event today. We will be talking about wealth trends and technology in 2023. Just before we get started, wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions during the webinar, we'd love to keep this open-ended. So feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom meeting. There's also a chat box that you can chat either to myself, I'm the host, Laura Smith, or the panelists, and we'll be reviewing those as we go through. Other than that, the webinar is being recorded, and I'll send out a copy of the recording and an email later this week. If you have any questions, feel free to message me during the webinar. I'll be happy to help you. With that, I will go ahead and turn this over to our team of panelists, and we'll get started.
Great, thanks, Laura. Great to be here, and thanks again, everyone, for joining. This is Tim Baker. Many of you might know me. I've been around a few years, but I recently joined Expero to lead the financial services practice. And Expero is hosting this together with OpenFin. Really excited to be moderating the panel on wealth trends and technology in 2023. I think we're at a really interesting stage in the industry. We've got some great speakers, some with some painful past experience and some battle scars. I can see Tito smiling. Tito and I worked together many years at Refinitiv. So why don't we get into it and start just with some intros for those of you viewing. Perhaps you can give us a 1-minute intro into yourselves and what your firm does, and what your affiliations are to the wealth industry. Vicky, do you want to go first?
Absolutely, Tim, and it's great to be here with all of you today. So I'm Vicky Sanders. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at OpenFin. I have roughly a 20-year career in capital markets, finance, and technology, having sat on trading floors and run fintech businesses. At OpenFin, we're helping the wealth management community with a set of productivity tools. Really a layer into a desktop, which eliminates the friction that people who use lots of apps every day experience. We include visual unification as well as productivity tools like search and notifications to really drive the employee experience. And within wealth management, that's incredibly important, where employee experience drives customer experience. And we're being used by advisors today to create a single pane of glass or a smart desktop that can link up and combine the applications and processes they use in engaging with clients, whether those are internal apps or third-party apps. And we also support our wealth management clients in their external distribution of their applications out to their clients.
Brilliant. Thanks, Vicky. You're based in London, but obviously your role is global.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Tito, why don't you go next?
Hey, Tim, pleasure to be here. And thank you so much for having me here with these legends, Vicky and Sebastian and yourself. In terms of my background, spent slightly over 2 decades within the financial services industry, call it SaaS revenue. That's a new buzzword nowadays. Managing sales at institutions such as Thomson Reuters across multiple streams, including wealth management and digital, and then on to selling some risk consulting globally for S&P. And then my last gig was at a very cool firm, InvestCloud, as a CRO for their financial supermarkets, catering to the wealth and asset management tech industry. Currently, I advise fintechs and regtechs, friends and family, and as to how better they can service the customers and the needs of the marketplace, including fundraising. Pleasure to be here.
Brilliant, Tito. Thanks, Sebastian.
Awesome. Hey, I'm Sebastian. I'm the CEO of Expero. We've been an innovation partner to our customers for about 20 years. We see ourselves as helping them deliver value by quickly building differentiating software for them. Our focus in that time has been on complex analytics, connected data, and the let's say, unique demands of expert users. Finance is about 50% of our business, and I probably don't need to tell anyone here how demanding finance users can be. We've designed for traders, asset managers, institutional salespeople. It's exciting. It's really rewarding work because the problems they're dealing with are really complex and high value, which is where we thrive. So we work across the tier. Tim actually sits almost on top of it, helping with product strategy, all the way through to process engineering, innovation, market discovery, UX design, machine learning, data science, engineering, and of course, QA and application development. You know, it takes a lot of specialists and a lot of communication to make a high functioning product team. And that's what we feel like we bring in our consulting practice. We help you bring a product to life. It's also worth mentioning, we license a platform as well called Expero Connected that focuses on accelerating that connected data analytics value proposition. It's at a bunch of banks, including 2 of the top 5 working on fraud detection and fighting financial crimes. It's at power and telecom companies doing customer intelligence and segmentation, which I think is an interesting topic for wealth today. I spent a lot of my day-to-day with the key accounts in the industry, including some pretty big wealth advisors. So also excited to talk a little bit about what we see them do as they innovate.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sebastian. And just a quick reminder, if you've got any questions, put those in the Q&A in Zoom, and Laura is going to help feed those out to us, and we'll try and field them as we go. So the first part of this, I thought we would just kind of put everything in context a bit. So let's start with some reflection on where the industry has come from. You know, Tito and Vicky, you've been around for a long time. We've just heard your backgrounds, both working with and selling into some of the biggest players in the industry, and now also obviously the fintech world. Tito, perhaps you could start with some of the kind of macro trends you've seen over the years. You probably won't be able to name names. We might be able to guess a few of them, but by all means, give us some of those great anecdotes I know you have. You've been working in the innovation space for many years. You know, is innovation a real thing in wealth?
Wow, loaded question. All right, so let me try and attempt on the macro side, right? So if you look at the 10 years, 2012 through 2022, right? What we saw was a massive increase in asset management and wealth. I believe the McKinsey study quoted about rising from 20 trillion to 50 point change trillion dollars in AUM and wealth management. In terms of competition for the AUM, what we used to have was, let's say, the large wirehouses, self-directed, regional, super regionals, and some RIAs. What we have seen is the evolution and the rise of the RIAs. They are now, if the number is about $4.6 to $4.8 trillion AUM with the RIAs only, and if you look at the top 100 RIAs, they have about 2.6 trillion of that AUM market share and continuously growing in that space. Self-directed, I mean, think of the names we used to have in the old days. Scott Trade, TD Ameritrade, now all part of Schwab.com, if you would. So increased M&A across the industry, not just between the large brokerages and wealth management, but also in the self-directed space. And of course, the rise of players such as Robinhood coming up in this market, right? You also had robo-advisors coming in. And it's interesting, I go back to 2016, you talk about anecdotes, right? 2016, when we saw the first evolution of, let's call it the big 3 robo-advisors in the space. A very famous guy in the industry, a good friend of mine, made a prediction that in the next 3 years, you're going to see the following happening to robo-advisory. One, they change and pivot their business model, which the number 1 did. Second, white label and sell yourself to the larger firms such as us. That also happened. 3, go bankrupt. That also happened, right? No names here. So we all know who they are. And increasingly, the larger players have adopted to either build, buy, or partner in the robo-advisory space, offering what we call a hybrid model of digital and human for different segments of the marketplace. Robo is not for the ultra high net worth or some high net worth space, but mostly in the affluent / mass affluent space. And of course, we can go across the generation gap between the baby boomers down to Gen Z millennial. The Gen Z millennials, of course, prefer more digital access to information and services, etc. Right? We also saw a rise of non-traditional products such as alts, right? So whether it's private investment in private companies, REITs, private equity, etc., popping up, and then underscoring that, as I talked about millennials and Gen Z, the rise in demand also for products that are ESG. That became a big focus, right? Gen Z's, millennials, more demanding for climate change or whatever cause they're passionate about as part of their investment, and then looking for such. Not so much the case with baby boomers and above that, right? In the ESG space, but definitely in that space, saw a lot of rise of the product, which means now the evolution and the offering of private markets, right? So there's some phenomenal companies out there like iCapital, Case, Forge, etc., that are offering such products and services to the marketplace. In fact, now the pivot would be for the advisors now to adapt to such holistic planning, if you would, offering such products as part of the customer portfolio. So that's a big one. Again, regulation always plays in my back because I came also from a RegTech background. There's increased regulation globally and in the US. I believe there's 800 plus regulatory changes globally. That's the last number I saw. And you have to, as a firm, you need to be abreast of that. You need to comply because the saying in that marketplace is compliance to regulation is very expensive. Non-compliance is very costly. So Reg BI, which was launched about 15, 16 months ago, still is a big factor here in the US wealth management industry and will continue to do so, right? So that what we see from a broader marketplace, and of course the rise of fintechs, right? Let's not forget that. In the last 10, 11 years, it's a crowded fintech market space. And what's funny, if you look at the marketing material, right? It sounds the same. It's like ChatGPT for one-on-one marketing. They all claim to have trillions of dollars of asset management. If you add them all up, they are multiples of what McKinsey quotes is in the marketplace. So that's fun. Everyone claims to do front to back. No one does. Nothing has been implemented. And we also saw consolidation of that, right? We saw the large players acquiring a stake, partially or fully in some of these fintechs. And to be quite frank, with pun intended, some of them did not pan out so well for them, right? That's what we saw from a now post-pandemic volatile marketplace, rising interest rates, renewed interest in credit market products. That's coming up in a big way. Firms have lost an average of 14 to 16% AUM in terms of from their customer side, but having high interest rates kind of balances the revenue out. The costs are still high for them in terms of operational. If you look at the wealth industry for the last 10, 12 years, they hardly made any changes on the back end, if you would, on the operational side, offering something like during pandemic, they were forced to have digital communication with their customers and the advisors. Great, you got Zoom team. It's a small step for a millennial and a giant leap for the financial advisor population, which is aging and aging. The average age is 57. They have a big challenge in attracting new talent. That's still going on. Younger talent, if you would. The idea of 360 view is still related to a household, not the family per se. And that's what we're seeing in the marketplace. And I think it's open to players such as OpenFin now to bring in some of those potential challenges and provide a great solution to that. So I'm looking forward to more in this industry, but in the last 10 years, innovation at most has been in spurts and not as promised or delivered.
Yeah, it's funny when you were saying, you were talking about some of the, the few successes and the several failures. One of the banks I worked at, announced a big acquisition of Wealthfront a couple of years ago, and then pulled out after 6 months. They didn't do the deal. I mean, there's clearly a lot more challenges below the surface than people think. So Vicky, you've been, as Tito nicely teed up, you've been at the coal face, helping these customers innovate. What's been your experience of that? How are some of those customers, the big customers? We heard Lenny at Wells Fargo talking at FinJS about how they are very systematically re-engineering their financial advisor desktop. What's been your experience? Where are we on that innovation journey?
I think it was really interesting what Tito said about the robo-advisors. They didn't win, right? The human being matters. And it matters a lot when it's all of an individual's wealth that they're thinking about investing, whether that's a small amount of money or millions and tens of millions of dollars. And why did the human win? Well, advisors won because this is a relationship business. But we're seeing changes in trends. So 47% of 16 to 17-year-olds are accessing their banking through their mobile app. They're digital first, right? And Gen Z is going to be a really big client for the wealth industry. So when you have a 57-year-old and maybe he's coming into the meeting with a yellow legal pad, that's not establishing the level of trust that a digital first generation expects. So how is the wealth industry responding? Well, it's definitely about digitalization. It's not about finding new data. I think that was the last decade, was where is the data? Can we find new data sources? That innovation has happened. Now it's about that last mile delivery. So there's these great apps, they might be internal. I've sourced some external apps as well. I have some data coming through. How do I put in the hands of the person, the advisor who owns the relationship? And yeah, you can listen to a video online of Lenny from Wells Fargo from FinJS last year, and he will talk about the great experience they've been able to build for their advisors. He'll talk about connecting and really stitching together all of the different processes plus the apps that make up those processes. So whether that's client onboarding, whether it's health and maintenance of relationships, preparing filings, preparing reports and recommendations for clients, all of that has to come together in one system, because you want your wealth advisor not to be a robot, but to have everything at their fingertips.
How many of those apps are the financial advisors using?
So an average knowledge worker, the average advisor has 36 apps that they use on a daily basis. And from a sort of swivel chair point of view, it's 1,100 times a day that they're switching between those apps. If you combine that with the number of hours spent searching, on average, it's a day and a half a week of their 5-day working week that they have in downtime. So there's definitely an employee retention, that trust that I was talking about, really driving the consumer experience, because the experience is a good one, but it's also how productive and efficient can organizations be. And we know that matters a lot in 2023.
And I read somewhere that, you know, the number of financial advisors, or the financial advisor population, is kind of aging out. I mean, my guy at UBS, I don't know whether Bill's on the call, you know, he's kind of, his son has just joined him in the practice, but he's, you know, and his son is in his 30s. So, you know, there's a demographic thing on the advisor side. So it's an imperative to make them more productive and smarter, and be in front of the next best action, as I keep hearing about.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's something Sebastian wants to talk to, because this is something that we've talked a lot about amongst ourselves, is how you build around a workflow instead of building around a single application. How we think about the desktop experience and the potential of apps to work with those other desktops.
I think it's interesting, because we often, because of our work in process design and user experience work, get approached to say, hey, can you make this, you know, more efficient, because our users dislike it. And, you know, the sad fact is, often in a real business case, some efficiency savings among a few people add up to real dollars, but they're nothing like, you know, enabling truly new business or avoiding risk. And so it's quite often difficult to justify the value of re-engineering around better workflows and making people happier. But this is an industry where I think there's an exception, because so many of these wealth advisors are on contract, right? And if they actually find their firms don't have tools that help them be responsive in all the ways we're talking about, they might take their business elsewhere. So it may not be worth exactly a ton of money to make them 15 minutes faster in a day, but if they can't provide the services because we didn't imagine it properly, they'll just take their business and go. And that's driving a lot of anxiety.
Yeah. So just another anecdote, since I'm the anecdote guy with the battle scars, I bang on agree with what Vicky just talked about, right? Advisors need to spend more time with their customers than working through all the minutiae. Let's call it the basic operational challenges, such as, you know, money movement, etc. Right? 2002, one of the best requirements gathering and a project that started under the leadership of James Gorman at Merrill Lynch captured all this, and they said, how can we have the advisors not spend 60 to 70% of the time doing mundane, repetitive tasks, right, and face off more with their customers, prospects, etc., to help grow, retain the business. Literally 2 weeks ago, I was reading an article by one of the industry leaders who's talking about the same thing. So in the last 12, 13 years, the needle has not moved at all. And I think what OpenFin is doing is pretty cool, right? In terms of consolidating that and, essentially negating the swivel chair approach. Vicky, I think the number I read was 82 apps is what they have on average. If you take into account communication channels also, et cetera, and internal marketing apps.
Yeah, and we're not even, I don't think they're counting the number of apps that are in a website. I dare ask how many tabs you currently have open on your browser, but anyone's screen, I ever see it's 20 plus, if not, I swear I saw someone with 100 the other day. And again, innovation, I am a big fan of innovation. It's something I've been involved in for a really long time. But it's adding to this problem. And when you have great new solutions that need to be integrated in, the integration cost is often a barrier to seeing those new technologies implemented where they should be within the advisor community.
Yeah, what I think is remarkable is that Outlook is still the place that all the alerts from all these systems all end up piling up. There's no single way at the moment, and of course OpenFin has developed your notification center to solve for this. But we were working on a customer use case recently, Sebastian, and all the alerts from all our systems were piling into Outlook.
That's what I was about to say. I mean, I think you see people wanting to innovate and allow their advisors to be more responsive and more efficient, but they're using a lot of tools built, in silos, maybe internally, and the people that built them have left. So there's a lot of, just practical difficulty in modernizing them. We get called in for some of those, or they're using third-party systems that are, commercially motivated to keep everything inside their four walls, but of course they can't do everything. And so we do assessments where we're trying to figure out, okay, how can you combine the reports you're getting from here, the insights you're getting from there? But Tim, I'm glad you brought that up, because the funniest thing is you'll do a big survey of all the tools they use. Oh, we use 80 tools. We use 20 tools day to day, and it's killing us and it's crushing us. If you actually sit next to them, they're just drowning in Outlook, because that's the best plan they have for keeping it all together right now. And, can't say too much bad about Outlook. Its faults are the faults of email, right? But it's really difficult. The reason they're drowning in Outlook is because the data is stuck in all these. We come at it very much from the view of, that last mile is broken, right? Yeah, you're right. They have all the data, they have all the systems, but you still just can't see it.
So let's stick with you, Sebastian. Shifting a little bit more towards the technologies. We've got a number of engagements, and you've worked on many client engagements in the wealth and banking space. What are some of the kind of common patterns that you've seen, and some of the really big, nutty, meaty challenges that customers have to face to kind of start on this journey towards, from massive fragmentation to a beautiful integrated workflow? So,
I see kind of two major trends, and, we see this across multiple industries, by the way, but, we're often approached because there's a particular tool or a couple of tools that need help. This is really old, that needs a UX uplift, or, this data, we feel like we get a lot better analytics from, and these are all good, healthy problems to solve, but you just pop your head above the water for a second and you realize a lot of the data delivery and client communication here is just automating mail and phone calls, right? It's the same business from 20 or 30 years ago. I was just laughing about this, 57-year-old wealth advisor talking to a millennial. He probably opens the meeting with, "Did you read the quarterly report I sent you?" And it's like, where is it? In my mailbox? Oh, great. You sent me a PDF. I didn't read it because it looks just the same as the last one. And I didn't flip through all the pages and disclosures. And we're still called on to sort of just automate that very report driven, phone call driven process, when consumers we see across industries are just, even as individuals, becoming more and more like the expert users we've always consulted for. They want to be interactive with their data. They want to be able to ask questions before they get on the phone. They want to be able to access, on their phone, on their iPad, wherever. And there's not enough imagination at that high level, right? So when our product engineers, product designers, UX designers engage, they often feel like they're just knitting away at one little corner, when really it needs a more comprehensive reimagination of what that customer experience is like. The other thing I'll say is and our firm has historically done a lot of work in portfolio management, asset management. I think the conversation about.
Oh, we lost him.
Did he get taken over by the robot?
You did.
Sorry about that. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
That was awkward.
Technology, my friend.
Oh, there we are. All right, I'm back now, I think. So the other trend we see is it's really easy to get stuck in a lot of the minutia, in a lot of the statements and holdings and money transfers, but really it's always been a big part of the job, but it's increasingly difficult as the wealth thresholds get lower, as families get more complicated to do the relationship management. So a lot of the low-hanging fruit you think you see in the system of, integrating from multiple sources, putting together a consolidated list of holdings, letting people swivel chair to transfer money and address issues, onboarding customers, that all matters. It really slows people down, but the biggest pressure is on relationship management. What's my next best conversation? This person that's calling, yes, I have 100 clients. Why am I talking to them right now? What is relevant now? Why might they be calling without me having to go into 100 places to go look and figure that out? So a lot of focus on, the Salesforces and CRMs of the world to help enable me, because it's a human business, right? All this technology is really just meant to amplify the humans. The other thing the other theme, so the first theme being the whole customer experience and customer relationship is really broken when we're approached. The other thing I'll say just echoes what we've said before, which is that implementation is surely hugely fragmented. And to some extent, it's just one of these generational things, right? You have a huge wave of investment, then the tools work and you let them slide for 10 years. Then all of a sudden you discover all your apps are 20 years old and the engineers are bored with them and they leave and there's new technologies. Some of it's just natural ebb and flow of technology cycles, but it's also just, there's always new asset classes. There's new needs for planning. Tito, I remember when we were prepping for this panel and talking a little bit about stuff, you mentioned how it's not just like, sign me up and give me a college payment simulator and let me retire. Like, what about elder care? What about families from multiple cultures that have multi-generational families? Where are the tools that I need to do all these? And they're not just a spreadsheet and they're not just, right. Oh, sure, I'll go work for 4 hours and plug them into the crummy simulator, that my firm provides for me. And I'll call you in 3 weeks after you've read my PDF, right? It's really challenging with the tools, not just from an efficiency perspective, but from the ability to actually deliver new value. So those are two big trends that I see, Tim.
Yeah, it's funny actually. Talk about data. Theoretically, all the data that you need to be able to assemble that next best action. Oh, there's been an inflow, or someone's child just hit 19 or 18 is going to college. That data is all in a CRM or in a books and accounting system somewhere, and yet it seems that it's still not connected together well at the back end.
Or even if it's available on the back end, we'll get called in and they'll say, can you light up this experience? Here's the kind of cases we think would be helpful. But 10 years ago, it'd often be the case that you'd first have to tell them, well, it's a great vision, but you don't even have that data. Yeah. People are much better now at creating, and of course, vendors have not been helpful here. There's data lakes and lake houses and warehouses and boats. And
name it, yeah.
You name it, they've got it, but at least they are starting to get it. And, certainly from our connected analytics platform perspective, we very much view that kind of polyglot data as part of the future. So we focus in our engagements often on just delivering data from where it is to where it needs to be. But that's really difficult because, and this is sort of a meta trend we see across industries where people entrusted with the data are no longer able to get away with just showing it back to you, right? Great, I printed your holdings for you. Here they are. What do you think? I need to know, were they good or not? I need to know, where am I in relation to the market? Where am I in relation to my plan? And I don't mean like filling a progress bar, right? I need a real conversation about it. And so just because you have the data doesn't mean it's really worth anything to the end users. So a lot of our engagements, we have to go in and say, great, that's great that you now finally have good, clean access to all your transaction data. How are you going to tell a customer that their kid's credit card bounced, and therefore you need to, address that directly and make sure that there's not anything funny going on. Oh,
I get
it's
those
been a
alerts.
very big deposit. Maybe you should call and find out if everything is great or what, right? There's intelligence you have to add to that data.
Totally agree. Sebastian, you'll be surprised, having worked both in the middle office and back office also. These systems are old, right? They're scalable, they're resilient, they really do well at what they're supposed to do, but pulling out data from there is a big challenge, regardless of what you have, data warehouse, data lake, etc. Right? You'll be surprised it still comes out in the CSV formats, and the COBOL warriors still 80 plus are still working on those machines. And then the other challenge we have is, even if you can pull the data out, the biggest challenge is bidirectional. In order for you to get that experience you talked about from a planning perspective, right? You need to have a bidirectional data integration. That doesn't exist today at all, which means it's a huge opportunity for firms out there to go and address that problem.
Well, and when you show the data to the user, the first mistake you can make is just showing the data to the user. The first example that comes to my mind, unfortunately, is more in the trading space, but it's classic to go to an accounting system and see two trades. But if you're in the trading system, they're actually a swap. Well, discussing that with a trader and getting it wrong, like, she's just going to ignore the whole rest of the conversation, right? And so stitching together what really happened across these multiple back-end systems is a key. You've got to understand the front-end transactional processes that dripped all that data into those systems before you can make sense of it for people, which gets me back to the whole emphasis on sort of process understanding, UX design. Why is she here and what does she really need to understand, right? You've got to come from that down to the database tables or CSVs. If you start from the database tables up, that's not helpful.
Vicky, where does the container tech, I don't know whether that's the right term, but that desktop technology layer, what does that really solve for? You launched Workspace, which I think has been very well adopted in the market and people really like it. Where's the game changer there? How is this container tech starting to help clients move along this continuum?
Yeah, I'm going to continue with what Sebastian was saying in terms of data and how data passes, right? So you mentioned that data's there and it needs to be in the right place. And that's where our advisor clients have already built the single pane of glass or smart desktop or client overview. And they're able to get data regardless of which system it's sitting in front of the eyeballs, right? And that's what matters. And it's doing it in a way that doesn't require rebuilding every single application, building a complete new front end, taking years to do that multi-stage project of different development teams, creating a series of APIs to feed that from wherever the data lake, the lake of data, then not in any form of water data, wherever it might be, to feed those systems. It's actually about taking what you have, preferably slightly more modern technology, and creating that view. And that's a real game changer. There will be apps or maybe microservices that help to feed this data flow that's in the background. That's where firms like Expero can help really to connect it together. The second piece is, Tim, you mentioned a couple times, that next best action. So there might be an event happening in one system and being able to use notifications to say, okay, there was a live event, we picked it up in this feed. Now, therefore, you should call the client. You talked about the credit card being blocked. You should call your son, first of all, you have to call the client and give them the recommended next best steps. And an interesting thing that we've observed is this idea of knowledge centers. So especially for firms who are managing very large groups of advisors, they have knowledge centers and actually probably talk about them singularly, a knowledge center. But the reality is that information is spread across the firms. There are technology tools that can be used to centrally host that data. But because of the siloed development history, some of the onboarding data might be in system A, some of the event data is going to be in cloud hosted location B, and so on and so forth. So actually having a centralized search that regardless of where the underlying content I need to do my job is sitting, I can search for that and I can access it. So data is, again, it's there, but how is a desktop user, and again, this is all things that's happening client side. It's not about server side connectivity. It's not about building new expensive APIs. It's really about creating that experience on the desktop, doing the best with what you have and building around it.
I guess your framework also allows, those big customers with, 30 or 40, 50 apps to break the problem down and to essentially containerize each piece. And then if they need to redo the books and records, that doesn't have to be tied to that front end piece. You've kind of decoupled the front end user experience from the back end stuff. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's absolutely creating the ability to create multiple phases of a project where the front end can be done separately. It can be done first in many instances, which is a big advantage when you want to move your advisors over to the latest and greatest system. There's another piece to it for the development teams at wealth management firms,
right,
that they don't all have to be working to the same version, that they can be working on different projects, working at different stages and versions that they're using, and those will all coexist on the desktop together. I think that's an important thing when we think about efficient teams, when we think about work from home, co-location, all of the coordination issues that exist now, and that teams who are working on one individual application shouldn't be stuck in a DevOps flow because of some versioning controls.
Let me just follow on with that, Vicki, a little bit. What we see as consultants in this space is, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, you can go talk to the IT owners, the business owners, and they'll name all the applications and name all the processes that need to happen. And then when you sit down with the user, you discover actually they do know all about all those things, but the only reason they can do their job is their 15 secret spreadsheets that they're using to consolidate the data, right? And look, some of that's unavoidable because you have to innovate somewhere, but a lot of it is actually tragic because there is so much data. To go answer that question about, why is that credit card blocked, or what's going on that your contributions are smaller now, or, you had a baby, right? There's just so much work to go dive into all those little systems. Even if you make it easier for them, which a framework like OpenFin does, there's really a lot of thoughtful work that has to go down into bringing it all together. If you make them fish everywhere, it's what we like calling it a chore factory. Hey, we made your search button even faster and we made your spreadsheet rows even smaller. So good luck, buddy. Go find that data even better. And it's like, well, thank you. If that's what I need to do, I can do it. But far better, and the trend we're seeing is where we try to get in front of them, exception-based. Hey, across the firm, we've talked about it. When people have new kids, here's the set of things that are interesting. We can go into these systems, pull them out for you. So it's about showing them the systems, a lot about letting them work in the systems, but also filling in all the gaps by helping focus them on what's there, being a true assistant.
Yeah,
I'm so excited.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to pick up on that. There's this element of the mundane, the copying and pasting. During lockdown, I taught my 9-year-old how to do Control-C, Control-V.
Yeah.
So best thing I can ever teach you, probably the only life lesson. And the number of highly experienced, highly educated employees who are either rekeying or copying and pasting is just insane. So again, being able to pass that information automatically between applications on your desktops, or pre-populating the next screen in a workflow that might have been predefined, all of that time saving adds up, and it adds up in a way that the customer trusts, because when they have downtime of any sort with their advisor, that starts to chip away at that level of trust. So it's the small stuff does add up.
That's huge. I'm so excited just listening to Vicki and what OpenFin is doing, because I was frankly tired listening to the CRM companies being the choice of desktop and doing those kind of integration, which they all failed, every one of them, from Siebel to whatever's out there right now. So I'm really excited, and there's great feedback from customers as to what OpenFin is doing in that space from a advisor experience. And rekeying, it sounds trivial. It's not trivial. They spend a lot of time,
and it's error prone.
Yeah, it's huge.
Prone. Yeah,
well, it echoes through the whole technology development process, which is people are becoming much more humble about how many of these systems they can go replace, or about which vendor may be able to do it all for them. So you're not, we don't need to badmouth Siebel or Salesforce as not
I
having
only
been
named
capable
Siebel
of
because it's no
doing
longer
it.
there.
Well,
Yeah.
just means we're old, but it's not necessarily, that they don't have the staff or the ambition to be able to do it. It's just not practical. There's so many pieces. They can't own all of it, and antitrust enforcement, all that good stuff. And so, yes, at the user level, you see, an increase in productivity because, they're not copy pasting. You're tying these things together, but you're also seeing it all through the development stack where people are admitting, look, we can no longer just bet on that one pane of glass. There's no one project that's going to come save us, some new platform that's going to make it work. We have to understand that we need to be able to cooperate to compete, right? Vendors are understanding that, and internal IT shops are realizing, look, yeah, maybe the 3 people that designed this product are gone, but we're not getting rid of it. So let's figure out how to, modernize it and how to integrate it cleanly with what we're doing. We see that a lot, and tell people, don't try to rewrite it. Don't try to throw it away, right?
Yeah.
Let's be thoughtful. There's so much more here than you realize. It's a built environment.
Yeah.
So let's talk. I'm conscious of time here. And Laura, I'm not sure if any questions have come through. But I thought we should now kind of talk about the future. We've talked a lot about where we've come from. And I think of the future in terms of the near-term future, which is really how are the best-in-class firms executing on their technology strategies today? And hopefully you can think of some good examples, because I think there are a few out there. And then in a minute we'll kind of talk about the longer term, the more potentially more exciting stuff, the AI machine learning stuff. And I think we're all a bit skeptical about what that's delivered so far, but maybe there's some light at the end of the tunnel. So Vicky, can I start with you just to talk about some of I'm thinking of one particular client that's shown dramatic improvement in, I think, client onboarding. It'd be great to hear that case study. But anything else you want to cover?
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about some really interesting ideas here. The adoption of that is still pretty early stage, right? So there are more and more ideas that are coming up in terms of what a smart desktop can look like. Also, what does it need to include? Initially with OpenFin, our clients thought about their internal applications. Now they're thinking about their entire ecosystem. Some of our clients are recommending to their vendors that they come and work with us so that they can actually engage in an ideal fashion with the workflows that the clients already built on their own smart desktop. There are large vendors as well that support all of us in what we do. Yeah. $1 billion type market cap businesses, hundreds of billions. They've grown into these amazing franchises. But as Seb was saying, they've relied on email as an alerting system. And we know the flaws there. And they've relied on browsers, traditional browsers, for their app distribution. That's starting to change, that last mile delivery. So I think we'll just continue to see creativity from the people who know these workflows best in what they can do with the technology and the advice that's available to them. The onboarding scenario, so there's a good case study out there on RBC with Salesforce and what they were able to do. They reduced their wealth onboarding time from 3 days to 24 minutes. And that's an amazing accomplishment. I think that's a great outcome. But if we go back to our millennial Gen Z conversation, when have we ever seen a Gen Z wait 24 minutes?
Yeah, they expect click. Okay,
right. If it's not the length of a TikTok video, I'm not interested. So there's still work to do to really streamline, identifying what's necessary, look at where repetition exists. I'm sure you guys see that a lot. We see that all the time. Again, because of the siloed nature that applications have historically been built, the same thing sits in the same system in a slightly different way with maybe different fields, and the repetition is immense.
Tito, what are you seeing in the fintech space? You're advising a bunch of fintechs. What's exciting you there?
I have a slew of lists. I'm just trying to pick up what Seb and Vicky just said. in terms of, what Vicky was just talking about, is also alludes to personalization. We keep hearing the word personalization, and then some of the fintechs keep talking about hyper personalization. Haven't seen that delivered. But again, the experience, right? The entire digital experience. We talk about the Netflix experience and the Amazon experience. If you look at what the market, what the advisors have in front of them from a desktop perspective, not the OpenFin part, but the traditional desktop, right? It's still like 3 channels, black and white, right? At 2 sources of information. It's the traditional wire houses providing information with maybe 2 or 3 more. When I type in a stock, that's what I get, right? But information, as we know, is now in millions of sources around the world in multiple languages, right? So how do I know if something that I hold in my portfolio had an impact because there was a story out in, I don't know, Mandarin from Hangzhou, China? I don't have access to that, right? So those are the innovation that we are seeing in one of the very cool companies, Advice FinTech Studios. They provide market intelligence and regulatory intelligence both in the same channel for the advisors. And then what they can do is downstream, the firms can customize the communication channel via a widget, API, etc., or through a newsletter, email, and all integrated within Teams, or they can do that for the customers. So the customers know, I only care about, I'm a Gen Z or a millennial. I care about my portfolio, ESG news only, and this area. That's it. That's what you get. On the other side, could be someone like me, who's a Gen X with a millennial mindset and a patience of a Gen Z, that I only want XYZ criteria for my portfolio, compliance or intelligence. So that's what we're seeing. But back to overall what we're seeing here, the need is for a frictionless front to back in terms of technology. That's the biggest need of the marketplace, right? We're seeing that, hearing Vicky talk about the front end integration. Sebastian, you talked about front to back a little bit there. I'm excited about EY Nexus, for example, that just launched a $10 billion investment as offering a potential integrated bus or middle layer that can take in all the fintech applications or regtech apps and offer that as a service, wealth as a service to the customers. Excited about that, just launched, so wait and watch. Our industry doesn't move that much, as I talked about in the beginning.
That was 10, you said 10 billion?
10 billion investment, yeah.
If you need
really
a lot of money,
because
that's a very ambitious, you need billions.
It is. The good news is the people running that, I know them, they're phenomenal people. They know the space really, really cold. Hopefully the firms adopt to that, it'll be cool. The second is the democratization of assets. Customers are asking for more and more different assets. We talked about that right in the beginning. So hopefully there's a marketplace, not just for the consumers, but also for the advisors to take a look at what the manufacturing side, the asset managers are offering in terms of this managed accounts, portfolios, whatever they have, the products, right? The ability to choose is not there today. There are a couple of really cool firms that are working in that space. Hopefully that gets adopted and, wrapped around with the right compliance, regulation, etc. Check. That'll be fun. The third, of course, I want to talk about is Vicky talked about knowledge center, right? And then I look back at the comments Seb made to would you send a 40-pager PDF to Gen Z millennial? I think the industry needs to do a lot in terms of knowledge of consumers as it relates to not just the generational Gen Z or millennial who will not read through a 40-page, but they need to have an Insta-reel concept of a real bite size. How do you give that information out? We talked about that the idea of there's no course such as personal finance for high school kids or college kids as part of their curriculum, right? They're taught derivative swaps, M&A, etc., but not personal finance. They struggle with that. So we need to do a lot in the industry in terms of how we impart knowledge to our not just advisors, but also to our customers. And then the last point in the knowledge part is the fastest growing and the most powerful segment of the wealth management is females. 82% or 77%, depending on which study I read, of the spouses post the death of their, women post the death of their spouses change their advisors. Advisors don't include, see, here's the thing, 360. We talk about 360, everyone goes back to the household view and account view on the screen, blah, 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 right? 360 is about the life of your customer. It's the journey of the customer. You talked about, healthcare, nowadays post-COVID, mental health care is even more important, right? Yeah. How do you factor all that in, have a 360 view of the journey together of your customer? That's important. So how do you train your advisors, train your customers, and how to deal with, empowering the female customers into building that trust. Because end of the day, the business of investment, as Vicky pointed out, is emotional, right? Money is emotional. It's my hard-earned nest, and I don't want to mess with the principal. I want to grow it, of course, and leave a legacy for my family, kids, etc. Right? It's emotional, and when emotions come into play, tech is not the only thing. It's a hybrid model. It's digitization of processes to make things happen fast for the advisors. They can spend more time with their customers, and then it's the human advice.
Sebastian, what are you seeing? We're advising a bunch of customers right now. Which ones are in terms of vision and
two come to mind actually. Tito, you mentioned the UI Nexus project. We have an ex-client that just joined to be head of product of a group called FLX Networks. They are seeing a similar sort of challenge that you mentioned in the communication space, right? So many ETFs, so many investment strategies, so many products, so many advisors, so many platforms. They see a space where they can be a clearinghouse for providing all that data, in a compliant, searchable, understandable way, where you can sign up to hear what what matters. So your example, maybe me as an investor, I want to hear about my holdings, and FinTech Studios, who we've also worked with, can help me because they're finding news somewhere interesting. The FLX guys may be able to say, well, in the whole world of investment, we know you're focused on, inflation protection strategies for this reason. Therefore, we can help you, see through the noise. So just that delivery of platforms and an up-leveling of assisting people in finding the data they need. To your point, the data is all there, but so what? I can't walk through a snowstorm, right? There's just data everywhere. So certainly that's an interesting trend, right? Back in this, it's becoming a federation of data rather than everything is on your one platform forever and always. And then I guess, Tim, since you said I should think about the future, I thought I should mention machine learning, right? I guess, as consultants, there's always two times you talk about something. One, before everyone else talks about it because you want to be cool. And that was about 4 or 5 years ago, right? AI, ML, and what is it? And if you don't do ML, you're going to turn into a frog or something. And then it's a few years later when everyone gets serious about being able to implement it, right? Figuring out where it does fit in their strategies. And we're starting to see it a lot more, at the coalface, right? So I mentioned earlier, we license our connected platform into banks to fight fraud. What I think is really interesting is that, AI and ML are being really aggressively adopted all over these banks, but, in a practical way. We see it in fraud. But what's interesting, the challenge we see is just because you've got it, and just because Jimmy put together a model on his notebook, doesn't mean that demanding expert user, like a fraud investigator or a wealth advisor, is going to be able to take action on it. Hey, your cute little model told me I should call this guy. Why? Help me understand what data went into it. Help me understand what outcome you're expecting from that. So implementing, ML at the coalface here involves making sure it's explainable and making sure it's integrated into that data environment, those knowledge centers, right? Hey, your next best conversation is to call this guy because he just had a kid. Well, of course I should call someone because they just had a kid. But, what else do you know? Do I do it right away? Do I wait? What cohort does he fall into? Is this his 6th kid and I can get to him in a year? Or is it the 1st kid and I should call him today? I mean, it's like... And
what should I sell him?
There's a whole lot that goes on there. That's a big gap between sort of the math and gearhead focused, I ran a model and got these results, to the emotional impact or the, being a true assistant to that expert user. And that leads to something we see is that model building is sort of escaping the data science asylum, is what I call it, right? So we're increasingly seeing people saying, great, if I can go train a model on data, why do I need to wait for somebody to go learn Python and do it and this and that and deploy it to this? They're expecting, and we're starting to deliver systems where those people can build the models themselves, right? Great. I've been a wealth advisor for 20 years. You say I have all my data. I want to test a hypothesis. Why don't I train a model that says what should happen after someone has a kid, as an example? We see that in the fraud space. Investigators will say, I keep running into problems with Russian money in Cyprus. And so let me actually try to train a model on that and see if it helps any more than, my intuition. So that ability to really implement AI at the coalface, the ambition we see when we talk to wealth managers is all focused around the CRM side of things, right? So some AI should be able to help me to have that next best conversation. I talked about why that's difficult for an expert user because the AI has to explain itself. I'll also just leave with a note of human nature, which is all these vendors assume that the Salesforce instances are populated with beautifully written summaries of meetings that they've had forever and for all time. So we are very interested in seeing where the approaches and where the vendor approaches will go in aiding that. But that's the future that people are betting on. Read the emails, read the Slacks, read the Teams, study the past data, and be an assistant for me.
Brilliant. Sebastian, that was your last word. Does Tito or Vicky have a last word before we wrap?
I'll let Vicky go first. Go ahead.
Such a gentleman. Thank you. I was just pondering as Sebastian was talking there, that the model matters. There's a lot of power in what can be achieved with machine learning. I have direct experience with that, but if it's not in the right place, the value starts to decay very quickly. So you talk about the coal face. It's that last mile delivery. It needs to be in a location where someone can do something with it, buried in their inbox. Not a great idea in an application that's 18 clicks away from where I am right now, also not going to help. So the delivery of intelligence matters.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm yet to see AI in wealth management. At best, it's automated intelligence or RPA tools. That's what it is. ML, yes, we're seeing that. As I mentioned, there's so much opportunity and excitement in the industry, and I think the future is awesome, really bright for the industry, both from the wealth management firms side of the house, but also from the fintech space. Firms who will adopt and change and really pivot fast will be there. Otherwise, they could be, what happened to robo-advisors. That's exactly what's going to take place, because the other big challenge that's coming fast and furious is embedded finance, right? Who knows? Amazon might step into the space, and the other folks that'll start offering embedded finance to their customers from banking, payments, and slowly moving into the wealth management space. Look at SoFi. Great example of a phenomenal solution and a great firm out there, right? So it's an exciting space for us. Curious to see what the next, not 10 years, but the next 5 years would pan out to be, and how fast and agile these firms are in terms of adopting all the cool technologies that are out there from OpenFin, Expero, and FinTech Studios, etc. And let's see what happens. Perhaps we should have this annual just to get a
I was just going to say,
where we were, and then see where we are next year.
I was just going to say, why don't we do a redux in 12 months, and hopefully we'll feel like the whole industry is moved forwards and we've got some more wins under our belt. Well, that was brilliant. Thank you for those of you who are still dialed in. We'll post the video. I'll write up some notes. Hopefully it won't be a year before I see you again, Tito. Vicky, I know we're going to see you very soon. But have a great rest of the week, everyone, and speak to you all soon.
Thanks.
Take care. Thank you so much, all. Cheers. Bye-bye.